Well, let's get right into the content then, shall we? Because if anyone had noticed, I had, or if anyone had watched, I had did a segment on a debate that Jackson Hinkle had the other day with someone called Andrea. It was basically about the Netflix strike, and he didn't make particularly good points, but the other person basically they called themselves an ANCOM, yet they didn't understand like basic tenets of Marxism, which made the other person look like a cart horse in comparison to Jackson Hinkle. But he made a couple of weird points during the actual debate itself, when he was somehow talking about specific classes, specific people not counting as working class, even though they have is the labor power and they work for a wage. Like, I don't think you quite understand the Marxism you came to you represent. He was calling these people like the professional managerial class, which I guess you could have as a specific kind of position that you can hold within a capitalist framework, but that doesn't necessarily make you not working class. And I mentioned this when I was covering the debate as well, that I was saying that he didn't really kind of make sense from kind of like a Marxist perspective. Clearly, he knew the take wasn't very good, and this was so he decided to tweet it out because essentially what this kind of culture, this kind of streamer culture they've got going in this kind of like infrared Jackson Hinkle like kind of group, is basically what you do is you tweet out something incendiary, make yourself notorious, and then ride the ratio for infamy, and then use that to gain support, essentially. Which clearly worked in this case because he was clearly riding the absolute crazy ratio here. Because I mean, let's be real. Like, okay, just to go over again what I was saying previously in my when I went over his debate yesterday, in that people like academics, teachers, social workers, engineers, and nurses, and people like that, these people are working class. All they do is sell their labor power, and they do not own the means of production, in any kind of a sense. They may have, like, if they're a manager, you may have control over buying labor power slightly, in which case you're probably closer to like PMC than a lot of these people, but I think it's a pretty useless term a lot of the time anyway. Just call people just wealthy liberals. It basically means the same thing, from a in like an actual working context, right? So this didn't really make sense in it because he can't call these people petite bourgeois, which they fundamentally just aren't, right? That's not what they are at all. So, but again, he got roasted about this on Twitter, but he doesn't really care because as long as he gains engagement, that's all he really cares about. Because engagement is what drives the clicks. It's what drives the infamy. It's what drives people's interactions and things like that. But Sonsol, who is a Switch streamer, who I quite like his content. We disagree on a lot of things, but I think he makes good memes. Then realized this tweet that he's done was just plagiarized from Wikipedia. He literally just copy and pasted this list and then added Netflix workers so he could use it to skewer the people who were striking for the Netflix strike against the Dave Chappelle stuff. That, again, debate that I went over yesterday, and that's what let him delete it. Like, it's incredibly frustrating to have someone who calls himself like a Marxist-Leninist or whatever, who's, I guess, he kind of saw like the rise of infrared and thought he'd kind of cash in off somebody who's much more educated on any of these issues, because Has is intelligent and very educated. I think he's a child in the way that he purports himself on the internet, but he is very smart and he has plenty of knowledge as well. I disagree with. I disagree with all his kind of cultural predilections or whatever, but that's nothing to do with him, like his the way he functions or the level to which he's an intellectual and well-read individual, because he absolutely is 100%. Whereas Jackson Hinkle is not. Jackson Hinkle is just like fucking grifter. And he even doesn't even know the Marxism that he says he's supposed to know. Like, I was making the point here is that some of these people are labor aristocracy, so people who are still members of the working class, but not necessarily the proletariat, who have high enough wages that they are kind of removed from the struggles of the proletarian class, so much so that they don't really they're not as easy to radicalize into class consciousness because they don't see themselves as being part of the regular proletariat, and part of that is passed down from the capitalist class because it's seen as something edifying, something something aspirational, right, to be in that position, and they use that to be able to pit working class people against each other, because at the end of the day it doesn't really matter whether you're a social worker or they work in a factory or whether you're a teacher. Like, the kind of class relation that you have is the same. Like the material interest that you have within society with regards to the structure of the economic mode of production, these things are in accordance with each other. So trying to pit these people against each other essentially is just vibes. Like I made this point to Jackson Hinkle on Twitter. Like see the rest of the tweet that he put down here was a podcast's not working class either, income's not indicator class, which is true. Like being rich isn't what determines your class. Your class is, where you are in the economic strata, your relationship to the means of production. And I couldn't give you a proper Marxist argument about whether podcasters are working class or not, because, like, are you an employee of YouTube or Twitch or whatever? Are you an independent contractor? Do you own enough of your own labor that, the whatever agreement that you negotiate with whichever platform is hosting your content, does that mean that you're essentially a sole trader? Are sole traders working class? I think these are discussions that we can have. I think probably a lot of sole traders probably would come into petite bourgeois, although a lot of them don't hire labor power really. But yeah, and he says, although nurse and teachers aren't working class by profession, I'm not sure denying or downplaying they are facing the same economic issues as the working class. We should be more precise about how we use this word. Now, my response is like the idea that working class is like a vibe about the kind of work you do, rather than your economic relationship to the means of production, is literally the fucking rightoid argument. It's literally just like, well, working class means that you wear like a flat cap and you get your hands dirty at the factory. Because, I mean, that is harder work. I'm not saying that it's not. But that doesn't make you any more or less working class than someone who works in a call center, or someone who works at H&M, or someone who works retail, or someone who's like, I don't know, like a junior coder or something. Or, for example, a fucking nurse. Nurses get paid dog shit. They don't, what fucking means of production do they own? Like, this is such a nonsense argument. And the fact that he even claims in his tweet they face the same economic issues, which is the whole point of the Marxist analysis of capitalism, in that the proletariat in general have the same material interests. So the example I gave in the debate was, say for example, the minimum wage gets increased from £9 something to £15. This would raise the wages of both nurses and people who work in factories, because both these people, all they do is sell their labor power. So increasing the value of the labor power is good for both of them within capitalism. Like, simple. Same economic interests, and that's the reason why you have the bourgeois proletariat dichotomy, because they have conflicting material interests, and that creates class conflict due to the fact that you need to have the state to mediate between them to be able to have a cohesive society. That's the whole point of the Marxist argument, and it's ridiculous nonsense division to be able to essentially, I guess, rift kind of conservative viewers. I guess maybe that's what he's doing. So I think that's why, again, I think he latched onto this kind of trans argument, because he, like, the kind of cultural conservatism is something that doesn't really have a proper kind of populist economic standpoint associated with it. So they're trying to, like, get that kind of USP, I guess. But it's just so, like, monumentally incorrect in the way that he is kind of looking through the Marxist analysis of the situation. Just makes him look like a fucking clown. Like this guy's his job is advocating for Marxism-Leninism on Twitter and on Twitch and YouTube. I mean, to be fair, this is a guy who got called out for having a DSA patch. He's been all over this different shops, like, and dived his hands into each trash can of ideology at the end of the day. And he's just kind of a snake oil salesman, just trying to essentially clout chase his way to the top. So I don't seriously believe he holds a lot of the views that he holds here. I think he looks up to Infrared, because Infrared is, smarter and, less cringe than he is, and more popular. So I just think he's kind of just feels a bit emasculated by Infrared, and thinks that if he copies Infrared, they'll somehow be able to get as big and siphon off some of the audience. But which I guess he has done, because Infrared's kind of used that as a kind of jumping off point to be able to gain an even bigger viewer base. Just let Jackson Hinkle humiliate himself on the internet, and then kind of like mop up all of the people who've been moved to that kind of ideological framework. But incredibly silly to the way in which that he was trying to justify the stupid points he made in the debate, because he did, well, as I said, like, the person he was debating with didn't know any of the Marxism at all. Like, he could have just said whatever he wanted. He could have made a really, like, a benign point about differences in positions in the labor hierarchy these people might hold, and that would have been the end of it, and he would have won the debate, and because this person didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. But he had to find a way in which he could turn this into like Twitter engagement, he like tweeted out the fucking dumbest take that he had during the debate. So silly. Which is a shame, because I think it's a problem that we have this kind of group of people on the left who think that, you know, it's because not even like class reductionism. It's just like progressive antagonism, like just antagonizing progressives for clout, because they understand there's a group of people who didn't like progressives, and I understand why. Like, a lot of progressives of the internet are extremely fucking cringe, like woke scoldy types that I don't really enjoy having, you know, interactions with a lot of these people, and they harm the movement by being optically poor. But just to say, well, in which case we're going to go the whole opposite way and just say, well, fuck trans people, they're not even like striking on behalf of what they want. We can't even advocate this as part of the working class movement because it, you know, brings the movement into disrepute or something, which is the kind of vibe that I get from what he's trying to say here. Doesn't make any fucking sense. Unless, of course, all you're doing is grifting for money on the internet. Like, I mean, Christian Florelius, who I follow on Twitter, I just think is really good. He's a Marxist, from Marxist historian from Norway. He got involved in the drama as well. Let me find his tweets. Let me have a look here, because what Jackson Hinkle also did after doing all this and getting roasted for it on Twitter, he then chopped up a video of Richard Wolff interview on the Surf's TV, trying to claim that validated his nonsense position, but he deliberately chimped out of context so that it didn't make any sense. So it wasn't the original point that Richard Wolff was trying to make. So let me just, if we just go over to here, that's the one we want. So nobody's arguing that proletariat does not consist of different sections. However, despite the differences between these sections, they are still proles as long as they are compelled to sell their labour due to lack of means of production/capital. True. So yeah, Marx Engels' observation in the manifesto on how the professionals became proletarianized. That is written in the middle of the 19th century. 100%, right? Like, they knew from the start that this is what happened. They don't have their necessary kind of class interests are the same as the remainder of the proletariat, but they get convinced to give that up in subservience of the capitalist class for, you know, future promotions by the threatening of sanctions in the workplace by not beholding to the whims of the capitalist class, right? That's how these these capitalist institutions run down. You have the people at the top who then make the people do their bidding, who make the people under them do their bidding, etc., etc. Like, for example, I'm like a deputy team leader in the call center that I work in, and essentially I have to do the bidding of my manager against the, you know, the interests of the people who are below me. But the only reason why I have to do that is because my manager is beholden to their manager, essentially. There's this whole hierarchy that goes down where you have to be convinced to give up your own class interests within to, you know, in favor of the bottom line of whatever company that you're working for. And it's really toxic because it's deliberately there to stop people from, you know, engaging along class lines, because there's nothing that I do in my particular position that should alienate me from the remainder of the working class who I work alongside with. I mean, I still get bollocks by my manager if I don't do something right. Like, it's all part of the same system. And saying that somebody can be subsumed by the system and have their viewpoints recuperated is not the same as saying that they have a different position within the labor hierarchy or different relationship to the means of production and therefore a different class. It was completely nonsensical. So I think, let me find what the Serfs posted where they show the difference between what Hinkle, the video that Hinkle made, and then the original segment. Let's find it. Let's have a look at this one.
The parallel here is, once upon a time, people thought of all workers as being the same thing. And folks had to come along and say, no, turns out your racial difference matters. Turns out your gender difference matters. Turns out, and then fill in the blank. In a way, Marxism does that in terms of something you have to learn to understand before you recognize it when it's staring you in the face.
To use the statement that if you are not an employer, you're an employee, you are by definition a worker. Is that too broad of a statement to make?
No, I mean, you know, in and of itself, no. It's a question of whether you contextualize such a remark, such a statement, such a sentence, in such a way that it doesn't convey something which is incorrect. For example, that we're all the same. That the fact that I share the identity with John or Mary over there, that we are all employees or workers or something like that, that's fine. We share that. And remember, he's a student of Hegel. Marx understands that everything is contradictory. I am like you because we are both workers. I am unlike you because you're productive and I'm unproductive. Or I'm unlike you because you're a female and I'm a male, or you're black or I'm white, or whatever it is, that these things have to be given their recognition, their understanding, that if you make a unity of everybody, it's got to be a unity, and here comes Hegel, built on the disunity of your differences. That can be done, but it has to be understood as a task which is not accomplished.
And like what Richard Wolff said there is like based on like true. Like he's 100% incorrect, and Hinkle's dishonestly clip chimped that to be able to use it to make the position that Richard Wolff isn't advocating. Like the level of kind of hypercopium you have to engage in for being like absolutely fucking dragged on Twitter for such a fucking stupid take, that you have to take somebody else's work and then clip chimp it out of context to make your point for you, like dishonestly. It's just like, that's fucking rancid. Like, it's just silly. Like, and I guess it just shows how kind of pathetic these people are, and in general just shows how pathetic a lot of that side of the aisle are in with regards to these arguments. Because I respect Richard Wolff's work a lot, and he's absolutely correct here. And Richard Wolff isn't saying that these people aren't also working class, because that's what he was saying. He's saying that regardless of company position within within the labor hierarchy, or whether what other kind of different like marginalized like demographic that you belong to, you can still organize through unifying qualities, with regards to, I don't know, maybe something like your material relationship to the means of production, which is the Marxist analysis that Jackson Hinkle just completely fucking missed. So yeah, that was an absolute state from Jackson Hinkle there, and it just shows that he's just, as well as being stupid, he's also completely fucking dishonest, and a liar. And that's all there really is to it. Sad state of affairs for a sad man. Which is a shame, because he could have. I reviewed his debate, and I thought he was very rhetorically proficient. And that the fact that he's just like coped so hard over trying to be deliberately incendiary for clicks, it's just pathetic, just completely pathetic. Anyway, moving on. So many times I've been stuck on a job and stuck in a position. I usually end up management, but that makes me feel obligated to being stuck, all with not even sure return besides a check for a salary. And exactly, that's true. And all you're doing is selling your labor power. But in the sale of your labor power, you're being reduced to having to take up a position that is antagonistic to the people you work with. But that's not your fault. That's the fault of the company structure. That's the fault of the mode of production. That's the fault of the people above you who forced you through the contract that you signed to sell your labor power, to work against the class interests of the people below you. Like that's just the thing that's just how capitalism works. I would say there's a really great Ugopnik video called "A Surviving Capitalism as a Socialist" or some other kind of thing, where he talks about the way in which that you can make workplaces better as a socialist in these positions. You just have to try and be as conciliatory towards the people who are underneath you at the end of the day, and just try and work in their interest as much as you can without angering the person above you. Just like try your best. Like, I understand it's difficult, and at the end of the day, we all have to earn a living somehow. No ethical consumption, etc., etc. And just because you're in a position where you have to be antagonistic to people who work below you, that as part of your job description, that doesn't mean that outside of work you can't, both unify under your genuine class interests to try and change the system. Because again, the system is the issue rather than any kind of individual failing or moral failing on your part. Like, I would always encourage you to do the best that you can to make the most out of the can of what you're doing, but I wouldn't castigate you for just doing the job that you're paid to do, because again, we're all victims of the system at the end of the day.